you sick and tired of having cracked, old, haggard looking Sambar mirrors, driving around with floppy mirrors like dog ears in the wind? I know I am. If your mirrors are cracked down here towards the bottom of your Sambar mirrors, which is pretty common for these old mirrors because they get a lot of movement and it's not very thick plastic right there, so it doesn't get very much flex to it and they crack over time, don't worry, I got ya. Here it is. So I have in my OK garage parts store replacement mirrors for the Sambars, Sambar Diaz, probably the Domingos. I don't know, actually, I've never seen the Domingo mirrors or really paid attention. But they are brand new. They are not OEM, but they're exact replicas of OEM mirrors. They come with the gasket that you put in between the body and the mirror piece. And they work great. They're very solid. I have a couple of these on my other truck. I just have not replaced the ones on my van, so I figured I would show a little video that I got a bunch of these in the other day. So if you're in the market for new mirrors, look no further. But yeah, it's super easy. The little cap inside, right on the other side of this, just pops off. Get a little plastic trim piece tool, pop it off. There's like a ball and socket, and it will just kind of pop out of the socket, and then it's held on with 3 Phillips head screws. Just take those Phillips head screws out and put on the new mirror and good to go. And back to our regular scheduled thing. What's up, guys, fellow Sambarians? So if you are fortunate enough to drive a carbureted Sambar, and I say that very sarcastically, if you run into this problem that I was having, this video may be helpful for you. It will save you a lot of time and a lot of headache and a lot of changing parts and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. So I recently just timed this truck. I made a video on it, but I haven't posted it yet because I wasn't quite sure if I was actually doing it right. But it turns out if you're planning on timing your truck, the manual will show 3 timing marks above top dead center. And later generations or different models of Sambars supposedly do not have those 3 marks, which those 3 marks are denoting 14% bottom top dead center, 10%, not 10%, 14 degrees, 10 degrees, and 6 degrees bottom top dead center advanced, and then top dead center. The ducks are awake. So I was a little confused as to, if I was doing it right, because when I checked the timing on this truck, it was advanced all the way to 14 degrees. So I was like, well, is that where it's supposed to be? And the manual's telling you it needs to be at the 6 degrees bottom top dead center with an RPM of 800 plus or minus 50. So I timed it to 6 degrees, advanced 6 degrees, which is the bottom of the 3 marks. And then what you do after that is then you set your idle. So I set my idle, and I'm like dead nuts on 850. I mean, it's so solid. It's really surprised how solid this truck is. The needle doesn't even move. It just sits at about 850, and it's super good because it used to idle really high. Obviously, it was advanced 14 degrees, which I think you would only advance it if you want that higher, that quicker acceleration, but you lose out on the top end. I could be wrong. I just remember I had a Ford Festiva and I used to advance it just so I could, when we would go racing or something, so I could get that quick little burst of speed, and then it would just wash out when it would get in higher RPMs. I thought it was a race car. It was not. But anyways, so I think they advanced this one because it was lacking power, and I figured out why it was lacking power. It wasn't the timing, which it's always good just to check your timing anyways. It's timing light, very simple. You put the clip on cylinder 1, which is the closest spark plug wire to your crank pulley, and then once you get it timed, that's when you adjust your idle screw, which I can show that when we do this. So with that being said, everything was timed. We went to church on Sunday, and this thing barely got up to 60 kilometers an hour, and I could not figure out what the heck was going on. We probably could have ran faster, and this thing was chugging. I had to put my hazards on and let people pass me because it was just, it couldn't get up to speed. So I think what was happening was it felt like it wasn't getting enough air, or it wasn't getting enough fuel. I couldn't figure out which one it was. It's a carburetor. I hate carburetors. I'm not good at carburetors. So it was just kind of trying to think, hey, it's like a giant lawnmower, like what's going on here? And so what I was trying to do was figure out if the choke was getting stuck on, which meant it wasn't getting enough air, and blah, blah, blah. So get home, and I spent most of the day after church trying to figure this thing out. I pulled the spark plugs out. They are super city, which I believe means they're running rich, very black. So it's running rich, which means that it's getting more fuel than it was getting air because it was starving for air. So that kind of makes me think, oh, okay, I'm getting a lack of air, not the fuel is not an issue. So what was happening is when I would full throttle it, it would accelerate quickly, but then it would get to about 4,000 or 5,000 RPMs at wide open throttle, and it would just, sputter. And it was just, if you would hit the sweet spot without wide open throttle, just enough to get it to accelerate, it was okay. But if you wide open throttled and tried to accelerate with that way, it wasn't going to go anywhere. It would just sputter, and it was like hitting a wall. So it always, since I bought the truck, it's kind of had this issue, but it seems to have gotten way worse after I timed it, and it's probably because it was timed high to kind of get rid of this problem. But how I would drive it was I would have to ease into the gas pedal. So if you're having this issue, if you wide open throttle and it's like starts dying and it can't keep up with where it's at with the throttle position, then this might be the same issue you're having. Trying to find that sweet spot on the throttle while trying to accelerate. If you go a little bit, like a millimeter past that section, no more power. So you'd have to back off on the throttle and then let it build up speed and then shift. So anyways, it was a power shifting game the whole time I kind of bought this truck, and it's just like, man, this thing has no power compared to my other white truck that's carbureted. Like, something is wrong. So then I thought, hey, the white truck works. Let's just mimic all the settings on the carburetor to the blue truck and everything else. So I checked the timing on the white truck. The timing was dead nuts on 6 degrees, bottom, top, dead center, which is the third line down. It idles just under 1,000 RPMs, which is good enough for me. You mainly want it to idle really low. If you don't want to produce smog, and when you go smog check, if you have to, which you shouldn't have to, you want it to idle really low because it's hardly burning anything at that point. It's basically about to stall. So it's kind of like a smog thing as well. So this thing, timings matched both trucks, so that eliminated that. There is I learned about this last night in the group I'm in, a pump valve or accelerator pump. So if you look on your carburetor on the left hand side, it looks like a diaphragm with a plunger going in and out of it. That's an accelerator pump. So when you full throttle it, you will notice that thing kind of move a little bit, because what it's doing is letting a little bit of fuel get in, a little more fuel get in to help feed the carburetor when you're wide open throttled. So the white truck, full throttle, that thing would move. I'm like, okay. Blue truck, full throttle, that thing would move. I'm like, okay, what the heck's going on? Well, the screws on, if you've noticed on your carburetor, the screws have paint marks. So the paint mark on the white truck, it looked like it had never moved. The paint mark on this truck had been completely turned. So apparently the guys who owned this before me knew there was a power issue, which I know they did because they told my buddy they lacked power, which it did lack power. There was something wrong with it. they messed with that pump accelerator screw. Either they did or the guy before them did, because it did not line up. And so I measured the distance between the two metal brackets with a caliper, cranked mine down to that same height, and the paint marks lined up, which those paint marks are there because that's how it leaves from the factory, and you're supposed to never mess with those when it leaves the factory because they're set, and that's how the truck is going to run properly. You shouldn't have to adjust those screws. Technically, you should not have to adjust them. So I'm like, okay, so it's not that, it's that thing is working. There was some suggestions that maybe it was, I had said in previous videos, I have the black Chinese wires and the red Chinese cap, which nothing wrong with Chinese stuff, it's just it's not as good as the Japanese parts you can get. So people are saying, well, and then iridium spark plugs might be an issue too, which kind of sounded semi okay, because it would start acting erratic when you'd start flooring it and trying to get going. Like maybe it was kind of misfiring a little bit, I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to figure this out. So I was like, okay, maybe it could be. So I changed the plug wires, I changed the rotor, I changed the distributor cap, I changed the spark plugs to be the V-powers, and did all that. And this is why I'm telling you this stuff, so you don't have to waste money on those expensive parts to figure out what the heck it was. So did all that, still ran exactly the same. So I'm like, okay, it can't be, it's lacking air somewhere, or it's lacking fuel. It's got to be something. There's a brand new fuel filter in it, and there's a brand new air filter in it. So what the heck is going on? So then I thought, you know what? Let's just split the air box and take the air filter out, which I know is dumb, but it was wet outside, so there was no dust or dirt flying around, and it was at night. And so I split the air box, no air filter, just let it sit free, took it out, and the truck just ran like it probably did the first day it rolled off the lot. So it ran perfect. And I'm like, okay, what the heck's going on? Like, we pull, it's obviously not getting enough air, but why is it not getting enough air now? So I start thinking, if you're familiar with Sambars, your fuel rail on the passenger side acts like a giant snorkel, if you will, that runs all the way to the front of the cab to get cold air, because you'll notice it gets very hot in the back, and you don't want to be sucking in hot air in these things. So the line goes all the way from the front bumper all the way through the fuel rail, frame rail, back to the airbox. So I thought maybe there was a dead rat, or something stuck in the frame rail, and so it wasn't allowing me to get full the amount of air that it needed, because it sounds like these carburetors are very tuned, so the parameters of messing with it kind of can really screw it up. Just a little bit lack of air in these things, it sounds like it will throw everything completely off, which again, I'll get to that. So I'm like, okay, there might be something in the fuel rail. So then what I did was, you'll see the rubber hose that comes out of the fuel, I keep saying fuel rail, frame rail. The rubber hose that comes out of the frame rail, I think in fuel rail because of the injectors on the fuel injected car. But the frame rail has a rubber hose that then goes to your airbox. So I disconnected the rubber hose at the airbox and just had the air filter in there. Ran it, and it did it again. It started sputtering. I'm like, what the heck is going on? I ran it without an air filter, ran great. I disconnected the rubber hose with the air filter, and it ran like crap again. So I'm like thinking, it's a brand new air filter, what's going on? So I take the air filter out. I'll post a picture of it on here. There was black soot on the air filter, and if you've seen my other previous videos, you will see how I've completely cleaned the air boxes, gotten all the oil out, because these things build up oil in the air boxes, because there's a vent pipe that goes from your valve cover to your air box and fills up with oil, blow by. So I completely you all right over there, guys? Sunshine? I completely eliminated all of that by putting a breather on top of the valve cover. You can put an oil catch can, you can do whatever you want. But me, personally, I just put a breather on it. I want to eliminate all oil, because even with a catch can, you'll still get oil residue that will blow through the system and start eventually building up in your throttle body or your carburetor. So I just get rid of it altogether. So there's no oil, there's nothing in my air box, so it's not oil that is on the air filter, it's actually exhaust soot. So if you have a carbureted Sambar, you will notice on the top of your muffler there is a welded on little box there, and it's like a heat exchange. So when they're cold, it can heat up the air on the muffler and recirculate it back to the engine and warm it up quicker. And how that works is there's a thermostatic or something like a thermostat in there, a valve flapper in your air box that, you know, could get gummed up with oil, but I know mine wasn't because it was completely clean. But what was happening is I think the flapper valve was allowing exhaust fumes to get inside the air box, because there's an exhaust leak somewhere in that chamber that is letting exhaust fumes go into my air box. Now if you think about it, exhaust fumes is spent oxygen, so there's not much oxygen in that on the fumes, so you're essentially choking the motor out because it's not getting the proper amount of oxygen. You're just sucking in fumes. So I then take the flapper valve and I glue it. I take that spring out from inside the valve box and I glue the flapper closed. So now we're not getting anything. So I put it back together, put the hose back on, and I drive it, and it kind of sputters just a little bit. Not as bad, just a little bit. But I think what was happening is there's two lines that go into your air box from that chamber, and one of them was still letting exhaust fumes get sucked inside the air box. So I took those lines off and reconnected them just straight into the air tubing, and that eliminated the problem. Oh, it kind of eliminated the problem. Kind of. Very close. So again, I'm like, it's a new air filter. What the heck is going on? So I take the air filter out of my white truck, which was a G Parts air filter, which I sell the G Parts ones. They're a little pricey because now I know they're good. Which also you could run a K&N and you'd be better off than a G Parts. But G Parts is better than this cheap Chinese one that I bought. I think it's just a white box, and you'll see them on eBay. I had that in the blue truck, the cheap Chinese one versus the G Parts one, so I swapped them. The G Parts one, no issues at all. Once I put it in there, buttoned it all back up, it ran great. So then I switched them back again. Then I put the Chinese one back in this one. Nothing. I mean, gave me the problems again. So the air filter obviously was doing its job. It was doing its job a little too well and was not letting enough air in and getting the proper fuel air mixture, which was just enough off to make the carburetor not accelerate properly. And it would accelerate neutral, no problem. It's just under a load, it could not keep up under any load. So I'm going to show you how to kind of fix that. So obviously you take your screws out of your lid. So like I was saying, here's your chamber that sits on top of the muffler and heats up the air. So I think what is happening is there is an exhaust leak inside that chamber somewhere, as you can see the black soot on that. And what was happening is it was just sucking right into the air box. So that thing heats up the air for your carburetor and your engine to warm up quicker, for emissions, I'm sure, and to just warm it up quicker. But I mean, even my smart car, which is like a 2009, has like an air pump on the back, which takes hot air off the exhaust manifold to heat up the engine quicker. So, you know, for emission stuff. So I mean, they still use that theory today, but we're not smogging this thing, so we're not worried about that. Plus, you know, you just got to let it run for, you know, 5 minutes before you go taking it out. and trying to cruise. But there's those two hoses. I'll post another picture what it was originally, or I'm sure you can see it yourself. There are these two red hoses that run from here to the tube and here to the box. The flapper valve is in here, and if you saw my earlier video, I talk about it a lot more. But actually, there's the breather I put on top of the valve cover to eliminate that hose that then runs over here that I just plugged with a rubber grommet. So I took this hose, reconnected it to this hose, and we have no issues now. We don't have any lag. We don't have, I mean, obviously it takes a little bit longer to warm up, but we don't have any issues. And here is your pump, accelerator pump, I think it is. So this screw, which is painted, should not be moved. This is set at the factory. So this was way off. It was way backed out. There was like an actual gap between the screw and the metal plate. So I took a caliper, measured it on the white truck, and then came back to this truck, measured it, and it actually sat right where that paint mark is when I put it back to correct order. So I kind of figured that thing's working. The choke wasn't getting stuck because I could see the choke, the arm, that's the choke right there. I could see it moving, so that wasn't an issue. And then if you want to adjust your idle, there's a screw down in that hole right there, that plastic plate. You'll want to, if you turn it clockwise, it will turn the accelerator, it will turn your RPMs up. If you go counterclockwise, it will drop RPMs. But if you drop RPMs, turn it a little bit and let it sit for a good 5 minutes, because it will not take effect right away. So you don't want to turn it way down because it's going to change. And obviously you want to adjust that when the truck is completely warmed up. Don't be messing with it when it's cold. Make sure it's completely warmed up and running happy before you go and adjust that. And I would even adjust it with the headlights on, so you put a little drag on the accelerator. So if you adjust it too low and you put your turn your lights on, your alternator won't kill the truck and drop the RPMs too low. But yeah, as you can see, I did new cap and rotor. I mean, new cap and rotor inside. The new plug wires, trying to eliminate everything. But all it came down to was taking that hose and just recirculating this air. So basically the air's going in here, and then air's going in here, and the flapper valve inside, I'll just show you. So even this air filter, the G-Parts one from the white truck, has a little bit of black on it as well. So the other one, I'm gonna have to do it. I'm gonna have to fix it because it's obviously leaking. See that flapper in there? So I actually I glued it to this to keep it completely closed. But then I thought, hey, let's just leave it open. So now we have 2 ports to get air in instead of just one little one coming through this hose right here. So you can take your spring out in there. It's very easy. The little thermostat spring, you can pull that thing out, and then that will let the flapper valve move freely and you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, so that was my issue, and we're running great. We're running like we probably should have since day one, and I'm super stoked that I was able to figure that out. And if you too are having issues where you want the throttle at wide open and it just kind of lugs, and then if you ease up on the throttle, then it starts to accelerate again, it could be this exact reason. So yeah, cool. Thanks for watching, guys. Again, if you need any parts, hit me up or check out the link I have in the description. And yeah, I'd be glad, I'd be real happy to help you out, get what you need, and keep that Sambar running good, or K-Car, whatever. I'm trying to stock Honda Active parts a little bit. So yeah, cool. Take it easy, guys.